Welcome to another episode of Hames Hot Mic, sponsored by Simpson Notaries. Another regional show today, as we will be talking with my old friend and almost colleague, Paul Horn, who's a mayoralty candidate from the District of Mission, after this quick break. We're back. Today's guest is Paul Horn. I first met Paul through his work with Riverside College. Riverside provides training for people who want to work in the community living field. And in 2005, Paul was elected to Mission City Council. We had another opportunity to work collaboratively at that time. He's another one of those guys whose community involvement list would take up a whole program. But here's a few of the things he's been involved with in Mission: the Mission Stone Soup Initiative, Grapevines Food Sharing, Minor Lacrosse, Mission Historical Society, Southwest Mission Ratepayers. I guess the list just goes on, and that's no surprise then that Paul has recently announced, and the reason I have him on the show is he's running for mayor in the upcoming by-election in the District of Mission. Welcome, Paul. It's really nice to see you.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Clint. And as you said, it's particularly nice because we've known each other for so long and in so many ways. So it's a nice connection, and just for that too. Thanks for having me.
It sure is. I've been looking forward to having this conversation with you. I know we've got lots of political things that we can talk about, but I just wanted to ask you about Riverside College. It's one of those systems that feeds employees into that community living sector and has done for a long time. How's that going, and is it still the love of your life?
It really is, and it's been a really tough thing because, of course, making the decision to run for mayor is the decision to be away from Riverside. And I was there the day it was opened. Ironically, September 11th, 2001 was a tragic day, but it was a really big day in Mission because we did open up Riverside and provided an avenue for a lot of people to go and get started in their careers. So you know my program with community support workers, but there were a lot of other people who come through that program, learning things in other careers and apprenticeable trades. And we continue to grow and expand and have partnerships with other colleges. So it's been a really successful innovation, and it's really fantastic and rewarding to see other communities actually trying to take that same idea and run with it.
Certainly the work I was doing benefited significantly from Riverside over the years. Happily retired now, but happy to know that that work's still going on. Paul, you apparently have lost your mind and have announced that you're running for mayor. And I know you're a political creature. What inspired this run at the mayor's chair?
I'm starting to wonder if your explanation is the simplest one, Clint, because I have been asked since I retired from council in 2011. I would estimate was asked 100 times a year to run for mayor, and said no very quickly and very easily in that time. But in the last couple of months, or since Pam Alexis was elected to the legislature here, something did tip for me. And if I was to give it a one-word answer, it would be chickens. A strange answer, I'm sure. But really what it comes down to is a story that kind of tipped the balance for me in our newspaper was about an 82-year-old man who was having a tremendously difficult time because he simply wanted to have a few chickens. And that on its own wouldn't have been enough to send me back into the political woods. But what I really feel is important is to engage with the community in a way that's constructive, really to capture community spirit. And if people feel like they have to be defensive when dealing with City Hall, we're not getting that work done. We are at a time in our history here in Mission that I think Chilliwack was at a number of years ago under your mayoralty, where there is really a lot of opportunity. And as you know personally, if you don't stick handle that well, then you end up paying a price for it generationally. And if you do handle it well, then you set up things really well for the future. And so that's really what I want to see us do. I want to see us come up with an approach to dealing with these new opportunities that is sustainable environmentally, economically, and in terms of community health and wellness. So there's a lot of work to be done. And when I looked at it, I thought, well, I feel like I'm the person who can do that.
Gosh, when I look around the Fraser Valley, and I was recently had a conversation with the mayor of Abbotsford, Henry Braun, who I know you know, I asked him this question: how is Mission coping with the growth that's coming into the community? What are the things that you see that they're doing well? What are things that you think ought to change and that you would bring to the table to manage that growth?
We have a really powerful economic development committee and an economic development department, and they're working really well. And frankly, we learned a lot from Chilliwack, and that might sound like I'm making it up, but we really did learn a lot from watching what happened there in the years previous. And the ability to consult effectively with economic drivers, people who have existing businesses that we want to retain or expand, as well as attracting other businesses. We're doing that well, but when they come here, that front counter experience has to deliver what we've been telling people they'll find here. We're experiencing more volume than ever, I should say. And what's exciting is that we're starting to see people come up with innovative designs that are more dense, that are innovative in terms of delivered forms of housing, industrial opportunities for economic growth, and allowing people to have opportunities for affordable and sustainable housing in the mix. But when they get there, they're often saying to us that we're not doing the job we need to in terms of giving them an efficient process, giving them consistent information throughout the process. Some of it comes down to pretty simple things like the software that we're using. And sometimes it comes down to whether we're doing strategic hiring and making good choices about how we process applications, whether they're development applications, whether they're land use planning for entire areas, or whether or not they're building permits. So I think that's one of the most important things we can do. It's a matter of respect. When people come through the door, and we're talking sometimes not just about big developers, we're talking about organizations like the local community living organization or the community services organization that wanted to expand our homeless facilities. And the kind of delays that they went through really have direct impacts on the lifestyle and the quality of life of people who are already challenged, people who already have struggles.
It's
So
interesting.
those are the kinds of things we improve.
It's interesting you talk about that. I remember saying to our staff when I was the mayor in Chilliwack, I remember vividly saying to them one day as we were talking about this, imagine if people had a choice about where they came and got their building permits. Imagine if they had a choice to pick between this city hall or that city hall. Why would they pick our city hall to come here to get things done? Why would that make a difference? And that seemed to resonate with folks. And that, I hear that's what you're saying, that you're in
And
the
that is
customer
the
service
choice.
business.
Exactly. And they do have that choice nowadays. I mean, literally, you can make an application to develop property and put most of your documents in online in some of the major Canadian cities now. And that technology exists quite easily for people. And then they can track it. You know, if I want to see my son's scores on his recent test at a school, I can go and log in and see what his teachers have graded him. I can see his attendance. That same basic technology can be used for people to supply the documents that they need to prove out their development application or their building permit. And when Mission has, and one of the things about Mission is it doesn't just have one city hall. We have our main city hall, we have Welton Common, we have our economic development office, and we have people working out of our facilities and our fire department. And those places right now can't effectively communicate and track applications. So yeah, we really do need to think about it as a customer service exercise. No question about it.
So let me ask you this. One of the issues, the land use and planning issues that I think I've read about in the District of Mission for as many years as I can remember is the Mission Waterfront. What's Paul Horn's vision for the Mission Waterfront, and how is that different than what we might see at City Hall today?
Well, I think it's really important to understand that the first part of my vision is that it has to be a democratic delivered vision. It has to be a made in Mission solution. And one of the things I've heard from my neighbors is that they don't want it just to be a place for rich people to have condos. I think we want to have some residential down there. We want to have some entertainment district down there. But what I really think we need, and I think a lot of people in Mission would like to see, is an opportunity for it to be more about us having an economic development or employment lands down there, some light industry, some medium industry, particularly on lands that have some encumbrances over to the western side. They're on the floodplain. They're not very far away from our sewage treatment plant and sometimes downwind from it. They're located near a racetrack and highways. And so those areas are really well suited to industrial uses and not as well suited to residential. So I think we will end up with a significant amount of that land being developed for places for people to work locally and make a living wage job.
So for the people that might be listening to this who aren't really familiar with what we talk about when we say the waterfront lands, give us some context of where those lands are and where they sit within the District of Mission.
So right now the lands extend. There's not a lot of roads there right now, but they extend right up, bordering against the current racetrack, and the racetrack itself will have a voice in it. That's the western end of what we mean by the waterfront, and it goes all the way past what is Horn Street and into the area where timberland would come out. If you know the area, or Timberwood, I guess it is, all the way to the east. And right now, that's currently all basically heavy industry use, although much of it is unused and completely undeveloped. And some of it has things that are, for example, soil conditions that will need to be addressed. Largely, a lot of that land is actually owned on the eastern side by the District of Mission. We acquired it back when I was in council in 2008 by purchasing or getting it back from the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, because it had originally been built to add on to the Mission Bridge, and they didn't need it for that purpose anymore. So there's quite a lot of that land that's already owned by the city. And then it goes right up north to where the current railroad tracks are. So it's quite a considerable piece of land down there, and many, many different parcel owners, which is part of the reason we need a plan. A lot of them are very old lots, some of the very first lots that were first put up for sale in the land auction that started Mission as we know it.
So correct me if I'm wrong, haven't there been, over the last number of years, proposals by legitimate developers or development interest to develop the property? What's happened with those proposals that have come forward?
From my understanding, there hasn't been a specific application on those particular lands. And so that kind of, as you know, makes things challenging. There's inquiries, there's discussion, but when a person goes and puts an actual application in, then there's ability to move forward. So my understanding is there hasn't been a specific application on those lands at this time. There's been a lot of community conversation about potential uses, potential sales for the purpose of it being used for medium and light industry. But at this point, there hasn't been a specific proposal put in. And one of the other challenges that's gone on there is that the placement of a duplicate sewage pipe has had to go over top of that land. And so the current landowners there really need to have some fairness and consideration for the fact that they have helped the city in terms of making sure that that line went through their property. And it's taken something in the order of 3 years for that to all be taken care of because of getting funding from the federal government. So there's nothing formal there, but I certainly think that there's a direct pressure from not only the landowner, but from the community in general to make sure that our planning exercise gives landowners the say on their land and is really expedited. So we're talking 18 months, and the people have already been hired by the current council to make that happen. So the work of the mayor will be to make sure that the pressure is on to actually make sure that still gets done by the date that it's said to be done, and that it actually includes everybody's voice, including existing landowners.
So when we think about the growth that Mission is going to incur over the next number of years, there are already signs that we're in a period of unprecedented growth. How is the official community plan in Mission reflecting that growth? What is your vision consistent with the plan's vision on how that growth is going to be accommodated? Where are the people going to live that are going to be coming to Mission in the next 5, 10, 15 years?
Yes, it is. And it is consistent with it. And I'll answer that question that there will be some people down on the waterfront, but the other two major areas that you'll see are the area where I live out here in Silverdale, where the polygon development is really demonstrated that they're ready to rumble. So we've already started planning the central neighborhood. They have 3 neighborhoods they want to move forward with, and central is the one they want to start with, because it has the easiest connectivity to the sewer and other infrastructure. So they're already really hitting the ground in a way that's much more tangible than we've ever seen in all of Silverdale's urban development history. That plan has been around as long as I have, 55 years, and suddenly things are actually happening. When that's built out, we're talking about really in the neighborhood of thousands of homes here, and in a way that potentially, if it's done right, is very environmentally tuned in and really progressive, with an opportunity for people to have neighborhood nodes where they can work and gather, and different housing types. So that will really accommodate a lot of people. But perhaps one of the most exciting things is what I'm seeing in our downtown area. So north of Railway Street up to 7th between roughly around Grand Street and Murray for the people out here. And we're starting to see some opportunities where people are building upward. And what that's going to give us is a dense population downtown, places for elderly people or people who don't want to be doing yard work to live and age in place. And the gravitas, the community density that we need to really keep restaurants and entertainment venues open down there and businesses thriving down there. So those are the three main places. One last thing about that is I think that one thing I think we can do to expand on our OCP, which is about 2 years old now, is do something that I think is way more plain language, way more accessible to people in terms of community visioning in some of our areas that are more rural, up in Ferndale and Stave Falls and Steelhead, places that are often sort of overlooked in our conversations because they are so rural and they don't get the same infrastructure or any plan. And really what we've done is had a plan over the history of Mission where we've said, well, you'll get infrastructure like water and sewer and sidewalks when you develop. But that really takes away the opportunity for people to have those things and live a different lifestyle. So I'd like for us to get something that's more of a softer version of an OCP that looks at a visioning process of 25 to 50 years. And we can, from that, start building out the infrastructure and the community policies so that we have a lot less user conflicts. Right now we have people coming in and they're wanting to put developments right in the middle of these places because the land is cheap. And a lot of the residents in those areas are constantly having to come to City Hall in a defensive mode, having to stand up for their neighborhood. And we'd like to do something more proactive. So for the most part, we've got a good one. We can build on it.
So what impact does the agricultural land reserve have on the development pattern in Mission? Or is this an area where you are, I'm not as familiar as I am on the other side of the river. Does that play a role in the development pattern in Mission?
You guys, you and Abbotsford had a far more difficult question around that because your lands were either sloped or ALR. Here in Mission, we don't really need to go onto our ALR to create opportunities for residential or industrial growth, especially if we do the waterfront correctly. And in recent conversations I've had with people who've been doing economic analysis, we'd be smarter to actually help the small amount of ALR land that we have really add value to their land with food processing, worker housing, that sort of thing. Yeah. So it's not a big issue here. And I don't see a reason for us to take land out of the ALR, but in fact to enhance the ability of farmers to make a living here.
That's great. I've been talking with Paul Horn, who's a candidate for the position of mayor in the District of Mission and an old friend, and I always learn something when I chat with Paul. We're going to be right back with Paul after these messages. Welcome back, everyone. My guest is Paul Horn, who's not only an old friend and somebody that I've worked with over the years, but has, as I said, jokingly lost his mind and is running for the position of mayor in the District of Mission. And I think that's great, Paul, that you're doing that. I know we talked a lot about your vision for the city of Mission. One of the things that I noticed over a number of years previously was there was a period of time, and I would say post 2011, when the District of Mission Council seemed to be at significant odds. Some would look at it and say that local politics in Mission had become almost a blood sport. It was very difficult to get some cohesion on the council. I'm assuming that has changed over the years, but what impact has something like that had on the District of Mission?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Clint. I mean, in 2011, the same year that I took a retirement from council, we had our first and only exercise with a slate government here. And I think it was a really a good learning opportunity. It showed you what happens when you don't have kind of the same basis of respect, but also appreciation for diversity. Instead of having a group of people who all said they had the same perspectives and ended up having difficulty pulling it off, I think it's proven to be a better model to have people who are principled and come in with maybe sometimes different perspectives, but shared values and respect. And I think we're kind of recapturing that again. We have a council right now that doesn't agree on everything, but has, I think, a respectful, collaborative approach. And if I'm elected, I feel really comfortable able to step into that. But I think we also still are paying a price for that because we lost about 32 senior people over the course of that term. And as you well know, those people are really incredibly important in terms of creating culture within your organization. I know from my research and my master's degree in organizational performance that there's nothing that trumps culture in terms of your organization's performance. If we have great people, we'll retain and attract more great people. If we don't, people will treat us like a stepping stone. So I think we have some, and we have more work to do to keep on bolstering that team. But I think Mission has said enough already with the populist approach, or the approach that is simply about cutting to the deepest part of a budget, and instead is looking at things like a principled approach and a value for money approach.
One of the things that has, I think, plagued every community in the Fraser Valley, and in fact, across our country and certainly in the United States, with a more challenging pricing in housing, we're seeing more and more people homeless in our communities. And I know that's the case in Mission. I know it's in Abbotsford. I know it's in Chilliwack. And we seem to be struggling with that particular issue. What do you think that Mission is doing that is good and needs to keep doing? And what are things that they're not doing that they should be doing at this point in time?
Well, as you know, and going back with both of us having deep roots in the community living movement, it's something that I'm very passionate about. It's something that has affected people, real people in my life. And because of that, I think I have an intimate understanding of where we have some issues. And we need to stop thinking about simply giving people a roof that wouldn't really be suitable for anybody else. It's not about making them comfortable in a tent or finding them an ATCO trailer someplace. It's about giving people the resources they need that help them to access services, particularly early on when they're dealing with issues of trauma, when they're dealing with issues of mental health, when they're dealing with addiction issues, when they're dealing with family discord issues, which is really a big cause of youth on our streets. Helping people when they're not only in to get into those services, but even to transition out of them, because often we have this sort of approach of saying, well, you're better now, and it's letting people go. And it takes more of a navigating approach than we're perhaps attempting to bring right now. I think Mission has somewhat of a hidden circumstance with homelessness because we don't have one large encampment. But you don't have to look very far before you can see people sleeping behind our grocery stores or on our train tracks or in our parks. And we all pay a price for that. I think one of the weirdest things about the model we have is that it is the most expensive model we could possibly imagine. We have police constantly going out, bylaw officers constantly going out and dealing with people as though they were criminals, and they're just recycled through the system, whether it's the criminal justice system or the emergency ward, and they never get better. So it's the most expensive system we can imagine. It's the cruelest system we can imagine, and it's the least effective system that we can imagine. What troubles me about this is that I don't care whether or not you're the most conservative person in the world or the most liberal person in the world. There's a business case for doing this right. It's harming every single one of us. Somebody the other day told me that their hose keeps getting stolen out of their carport. I mean, that's a cost to people. And if you don't feel comfortable in your own neighborhood, that's a reason for us to deal with it, even if you don't personally have a motivation to help people. So it's a win-win if we do these things. However, it's going to take a coordinated community approach. And that's what we did with the Stone Soup Initiative. It wasn't really about asking government to solve all the problems. It was about engaging with all of the community agencies. And Mission has a fantastic range of them, including faith-based organizations, not-for-profits, other non-governmental organizations, and just engaged citizens, and working in a coordinated way with them. So we need to update our social development plan. We need to reconvene our Mission Healthy Community Council. We haven't done the plan since 2008, and our council, our Mission Healthy Community Council, stopped existing in 2015. Those two things working together will get us back on track and start to reverse some of the erosion that we're seeing. Until we see that, we are going to just experience an epidemic of homelessness, and we have to be leaders in our community at doing something about it. I think we have the community passion and connectivity to do that, and that's one of the very important priorities for me.
I think one of the challenges every community faces is that when some jobs don't get done, it tends to fall into the enforcement realm, and that's that's the really expensive place when you start having to use RCMP officers for mental health wellness checks. When RCMP officers are the conduit between people who are having some sort of challenge on the street and a hospital, those are the most expensive people you can use to do that kind of work. And I think not only that, from a local government perspective, that's local property taxpayers are paying that bill instead of provincial taxpayers paying for mental health workers and paying for substance abuse workers.
Absolutely.
So it becomes
it's redundant.
So one of the challenges in any community, as I found, is there's a level of acceptance or non-acceptance for some of the harm reduction measures that are necessary to begin to put a dent in this problem. I'm talking about, I mean, in the old days, harm reduction was simply needle exchange, but today harm reduction is talking about a safe supply of drugs, safe places for people to use drugs. How is that going on in Mission, and what's the community feeling about those sorts of initiatives?
It's an ad hoc at this point, and that's why there's some people who are on board with it, and I think some people who aren't. Part of that needs to be in a coordinated, planned approach. Why? Because we need to think about harm reduction to the people whose children are playing in the local playgrounds as well. So collecting needles, and a lot of the time what we're doing is we're engaging. We have programs in our community where we have folks who are drug users who actually go around and collect needles from those places, but a lot of people don't know about that. So we need to make part of our plan to actually inform the whole community and respond to community concerns. The other thing we really need to do is treat those as gateway approaches. So what most people don't know about Insight, for example, which was a safe injection site, was that it wasn't just a place where people went and used drugs. They became familiar, they became exposed to people who could help them, and often it was their first step or their gateway to getting other services. They went from what we call a pre-contemplative stage to a contemplative to an action-oriented stage, where by building relationships and trust and building hope, they could actually go and access services and get well. If all we're doing is providing a place where people can get a shot, can take a shot and use a clean needle and avoid an opioid overdose, we're missing an opportunity. That's an important thing to do, but we can do so much more that ends up making that person have an opportunity for hope and help.
Absolutely. Well, Paul, it's just been an absolute pleasure reconnecting with you. I wish you well in your desire to become the next mayor of Mission. I hope that works out well for you. On a personal note, I can't think of anybody that could do a better job, but I don't know everybody who's running. Although this show is, as I've said, filmed in Chilliwack, I'm always cognizant of the many, many viewers that we have up and down the Fraser Valley, and I'm happy to keep tabs on things like what's happening in Mission, what's going on in other places. So if you've got ideas as viewers of other people or other issues you'd like me to talk about, send us an email. And at this time, I'd just like to say thanks, Paul, and thank you, viewers, so much for watching.
Thank you very much.